Hi guys, how you doing? Good? First of all, I'm incredibly excited to see all of you. I love Canada. I'm thrilled to be in Toronto, so thank you for having me. And I'm going to talk about a lot of different things, but I'm also going to bring up some things that I heard just last week at varying conferences and behind closed doors so that I could get a chance to just update you on some things that I thought were just completely new and I thought likely to be disruptive, which is always a good thing, by the way, in my vocabulary. So, okay. Okay. So first of all, this is a bit of a difficult talk to prepare just because it's about transformation, and when you're in the middle of transformation, it's hard for you to see around you and see, what's important to talk about, what's not important, and it's also hard to gauge what's idiosyncratic to your particular book publishing company versus, and that hence will not be applicable to any of you, versus what is sort of more globally applicable. So you should obviously think about this. All right. I've defined the problem as being a digital entrepreneur while running a traditional book publishing company. And in fact, the way I run my company, I can tell you, we operate as if we were running two companies, okay? My company's run on let me just give you the most obvious example. My company is run on SMART goals. And so the company itself has 5 SMART goals for the year. 3 of those SMART goals are actually for the current company. It's set up that way. Every month we report on here are the goals and where we are with respect to these goals for the current company. And then 2 are something that's called the future company. And those 2 are presented completely separately and have different kinds of ramifications. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's between those 2 companies because I think that's the space that's most fruitful. I'll tell you a little bit about Sourcebooks. I started Sourcebooks in my bedroom. That's the first computer I think we had. It is indeed, it was a $5,500 computer. It had a 7-inch screen, and I was very excited. I had a $6,000 laser writer that did 6 pages per minute, and I thought I could conquer the world. I really did. So, Sourcebooks is entirely bootstrapped. I started with no staff, just me, a house, no money, no knowledge of the industry. I think that was, by the way, the biggest advantage we had. And today, 20 plus years later, I'm a fairly seasoned entrepreneur. We publish 300 books a year. We have about 1,500 authors. We've had 16 New York Times bestsellers. Last year, in 2009, we were the second fastest growing book publisher in America. I don't know about North America. And we employ 75 people. We were up 30% last year, in a time when our economy was pretty tough. Okay? No. Okay. So in the process, I've been through a lot of evolution, a lot of change, a lot of transformation, and I think that's actually right now an enormous advantage. Today, we're all entrepreneurs, okay, whether we know it or we don't. Today, we have, enormous advantages in that entrepreneurial space. Today, we have customers. Today, we have employees. Today, we have authors. Okay? That's a very different way to transform than it is to start from scratch. And you need to think about the advantages you have and use those. Okay, so I'm going to talk, this is a kind of, the stuff I was telling you is brand new. So one of the things that really struck me when I was listening to people last week was changes are coming very, very quickly. And I'm not sure, I even anticipated how quickly this is coming at us. So I want to just talk about when I listened to a lot of different folks, I saw sort of 3 things that are going to kind of dramatically change what we're going to be seeing in the future. One is, and this is a theme, this is always connected, right? I mean, you're getting this, right? That mobility is a theme. When Steve Jobs launched the iPad, he defined Apple as a mobile devices company. Did you get that? That Google is leading a mobile-first strategy. This is a theme. And Tom Turvey said something last week that I thought was really interesting. He said, if you think about the book, if you think about the book as transforming to e-readers, that's a 3% of the market. And he said the addressable market for ebooks is anyone who's online. That dwarfs, and this is Tom talking, that dwarfs the dedicated reader market. By the way, Tom Turvey is with Google. Sorry, I should have made that point. That dwarfs the dedicated reader market. I would make one further point to you, because when he said that, it was kind of a light bulb in my head. That dwarfs the current market for books, for physical objects. And you really should think about that. We now have the opportunity to put a book into every hand, into every laptop, into every mobile device, anytime, anywhere. We can give you a book. Not only a book, but we can give you another kind of author-centric experience, right? We can connect you in hugely important ways. I see this as the book being unleashed, okay? And I think it's gloriously opportunistic for all of us. Okay, HP talked about liquid seamless media. So if Tom talks about an explosion of content, HP talked about things like flexible screens. He actually had a screen that he was bending in front of you, okay? And it fit into, one of those things, those roller things that you can just put it in. That just sort of blew my mind. He said 24 months away, okay? 3D devices, 3D screens, okay, that don't require the funky glasses, 24 to 36 months away. They're already using them in surgical suites, okay? And you can imagine what that means, right? That's kind of amazing. He talked about screens being anywhere. So that glass door over there, that could be, a set of screens that you could walk and use. So we're going to go from ultra-personal devices to anywhere, anytime devices, okay? I think it's a huge breakthrough. You're seeing some real innovation. And where we, I think, can contribute, and this was also talked about at some length, is in the area of economics. We're going to need to really play with business models, okay? The business models that we've had in the past, they're going to be part of the business models that we're going to get to experience in the future. But they're not the only business models we're going to have, okay? And what's going to be important for us as book publishers is to kind of discover what are business models that actually work. How does content translate? How do we monetize the content, our authors' content in different ways? Okay. So how do you apply, some of what you're hearing about to your publishing list? Okay, because I think one of the things that's very frightening is you look at your list and you say, hey, where do I start? I publish 300 books a year. Where do I begin having a conversation about this? So the place I started was here. It was about defining your verticals. Have people been hearing about verticals? Yes? Raise your hand if you've heard the term. Okay, all right. So I'm going to talk about the concepts that are really informing the decisions we're making. And the talk I'm going to give you today is really about the experiments we're running. And I was telling a couple of friends of mine that about half of it I can't talk to you about at all. It's under NDA from lots of different people. But about half of it I can talk about. And these are really different kinds of experiments. All right. And I hope they will help you. So defining your verticals. So here's what verticals are, and I'm going to use Mike Shatskin's definition, okay? So it's the organization and delivery of stuff, including information, in subject areas. But those subjects, and this is where it's really important to pay attention, the subjects are really, really narrow, okay? So just think about a Google book search, a Google search, right? You do not go into Google and say parenting. I'm just going to use parenting as an example for a moment, but parenting, right? You don't do that. You say ADHD. My kid's been diagnosed with ADHD. What is that? Okay? Or you say nursing. Or you say baby names. You're very narrow in your definition. So when we talk about verticals, we're talking about narrow subject areas. Autism. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, I did this for Sourcebooks, and there's a ton of, we have 2,000 or 3,000 books, 2,200, I think. So I did this for Sourcebooks. There were 43 verticals that we defined that had enough sort of pockets of content that we could think about them in terms of opportunities. And you need to kind of look at that and rank order, or what we did was we rank ordered where we had that content and how that content was important to its readers. And we did that in a couple different ways. So one way to do that is just by the sheer amount of content you've got. I got a lot of romance titles, or I've got a lot of titles in addiction, or I've got a lot of baby names. Or you can do it by sales units. I sell a lot of this particular category of books, or sales dollars. Or you can look at the size of your potential audience. You can say, my God, there are so many people who need X, whatever X might be. I happen to like POS units, just so you know, because I'm totally tied to metrics of sales. Anything that has to do with sales, I like. So the units, POS units, was kind of how we rank ordered our material. Another thing to think about is, what are you expert at? What are you like the best in the world at? It could be something really narrow, a particular kind of crocheting, a particular kind of quilting, a particular kind of, it can be very narrow, okay? But if you are the best in the world at that one thing, that is incredibly useful, and that is monetizable, okay? And what communities are you an essential part of? And I'm going to give you an example in Poetry Speaks, where we were an essential part of the poetry community, even though we never publish individual poetry books. So we have no poets' books, basically. We publish anthologies only. But every anthology we've published pretty much has been a bestseller in its category, either a New York Times bestseller or another kind of bestseller. So we were an essential part of this community despite not actually having the content in that community, okay? Okay, once you are looking at that set of pockets, among those verticals, you can define a continuum of content. Okay, so you can look at your content and say, okay, I own, and I'm going to just give you an example right now. Okay, I'm going to use baby names, our baby names category. And the book that's right there, the complete book of baby names, it's actually the best-selling baby naming book in America. And we sell an enormous number. It's number one, okay? And I haven't put all of our baby naming books on this continuum because there's a lot of them. So, we've got books at every price point. We've identified that there are 4 separate kinds of categories in baby names. All of that you don't need to know. But one of the things that was really interesting to me when I was looking at this example of the content continuum in baby names was that this has an application to your physical books as well. So, for example, once we put this continuum together, we identified that, in fact, there were no expensive baby naming books. None. That the cap on baby naming books looked to be about $14 to $16.99. And so we asked the question, even in the physical book space, could I actually create a giftable version of our content that would actually be on this continuum? And we created this baby name treasury that's over here. That's at $19.99. And what you need to know about it is it's now the number 4 baby naming book in the country, okay? So this kind of conceptualization, it's useful to you not only in terms of your, electronic products, but it's also going to be useful to you in just thinking about your physical products. And it provides strategic opportunities. Because you're going to create new ways of delivering content. You're not just going to create the existing ways of creating content. You want to find, so the first thing we did was something trivial. We did a baby names app. We did an iPhone app. It's called Most Baby Names. You can find it, on your iPhone. It went live in late February. We had 72-hour approval from Apple. Sourcebooks has an Apple developer's license. We were the second book publisher to get one. And it was profitable before the end of the year. Now, and it does this, you can look for baby names and you can look at lists of baby names. And now, I can tell you, because it was our first app, we got it completely wrong, okay? Because this is about experimentation, right? Experimentation means you're going to fail, okay? And you need to kind of be okay with that and get that inculcated into your organizations. You're going to succeed in some things and you're going to fail in some things, and that's okay, okay? So what happened was we actually built the database wrong. So because we had 100,000 names, it would pull up from that database of 100,000 names. What happens when I pull up from 100,000 names? I give you a list of 10 names. Would you like to know? You get really weird names. I mean, weird. Okay, so we had a lot of comments of, you know, these are weird names. So, so what we did is we pulled back and we said, okay, when you are defining, well, we fixed it. You don't need to know the nitty-gritty of it. Okay, let's look at the content continuum now, okay? So this is what it looks like when you add in our iPhone apps. And by the way, we've got a 99-cent iPhone app coming out. And you can imagine that there's some product down that continuum that's going to be even more expensive than $19.99. I don't know what it is yet, right? And this is sort of a vertical vision for baby names, and I use these vertical vision charts because it tells you a little bit about kind of how the marketing works, right? You know, so you've got iPhone apps marketing to a website that marks its best-selling titles, and then you've got a publicity campaign, right? And just sort of keeps spiraling through, right, your marketing campaign. From where I'm sitting, I will tell you that the world just got a lot bigger. The opportunities for book publishers exploded, you know, when we started looking at these kinds of things, because you're no longer bound by the physical object. And I think that it's really important that we realize as publishers that the promise of digital is more than text transfer. In other words, yes, I can make an ebook. Got it. Okay? I can take my text and I'll give it to you digitally. Got it. Okay? That is not the promise. That is not the sole promise of digital. There are much larger promises for you. And I'm just going to give you some other examples of them. All right, we happen to publish a book called the GRUBER'S SAT. The GRUBER'S SAT sold more than 7 million copies. It is one of the top-selling SAT books. In the college space, we actually produce the #1 college guide, the #1 SAT guide, not the #1 SAT guide. We're number 4, I think, in the SAT space, and the #1 going to college book. Okay. All right. The content continuum for Gary Gruber looks something like that. And notice that this is Gary Gruber's SAT content continuum, okay? Right? So it's an author, and within an author, I've defined a vertical, okay? The first thing we did, an iPhone app. I like iPhone apps. Because we've put in the infrastructure to build them, we can build them pretty cheaply. For us, they cost somewhere between $3,000 and $10,000. Other people cost $20,000 to $50,000, which I think is a ridiculous price. Okay? This was a very cheap iPhone app, and we put it together, and it's really cool because it allowed us to build some other things that we're going to have coming out. But beyond that, we started doing Gary Gruber webinars online with online partners. And we started really building Gary's, infrastructure to do that. And we started creating a lot of online partnerships. And you're going to see us create Gruber software. It's coming in next quarter. And you're going to see us completely reinvent what Gary Gruber is in the marketplace and the opportunities from a dollar point of view. Now, this is interesting because that's a totally new business, right? Software. We're not a software producer, right? So it's a totally new business with a totally new business model. And that's now open to us. And the content continuum looks like that. And the vertical vision looks like that. And the more I go into the space, the more people I find to talk to about what we're doing in the space. So I'm talking all the time to, U.S. News, who I happen to publish U.S. News, Ingram, Content Reserve, College Week Live. We've got 3 of the major authors on College Week Live this year. Independent test prep companies. So we're creating lots and lots of partnerships and lots of alliances that allow us to really kind of market our new products in a very cost-efficient way because it's completely vertical, right? And so we've got a catalog, we do NACAC, and of course, the ubiquitous iPhone apps. Okay, again, ebooks, they're just a part of the story. Yes, we're going to have ebooks. Yes, we'll make them available, and those are great. But there's other kinds of things that we can create in nonfiction. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about enhanced ebooks, because I think the most interesting part of the story to me is where enhanced ebooks, where you add audio and video content, I think those are going to redefine the way we teach and the way we learn. And I suspect that, within a decade, this is going to be pretty much what learning looks like. So I started with We Interrupt This Broadcast. Okay. Then this was 15 years ago or so. I started working on a book called We Interrupt This Broadcast with Joe Garner and Walter Cronkite and Bill Curtis. And the book was really interesting because it was right during the transition between audiobooks and between audio cassettes and CDs. And actually, when the author brought it to us, he actually had, this isn't at all the book he envisioned. I mean, took us 2 years to actually get to this book. But what happened was he envisioned a book in which, he was going to tell you a bunch of stories, and then he'd have a bunch of cassette tapes, and we would put it out in sort of a big package. Okay, in 2 years of development time, we discovered that, first of all, nobody liked his stories. They didn't. I mean, they wanted to hear about the event. They wanted an immersive experience. They wanted to be in the moment, right? That's what you want. Okay, so you could actually hear, so we went and we got the actual broadcasts, we put them on 2 audio CDs, and you could actually, hear the Hindenburg and then we had Bill Curtis narrate the whole thing. And it was incredible. This book really was unbelievable. And just so you know, it's the beginning of our mixed media format that we call Media Fusion, and we've sold 4.1 million mixed media books. Okay, so, and that one happened to be at $50. But we've done a lot of different books of this genre. I think it translates in really interesting ways to digital. I mean, digital really has a place today. So this happens to be a book that I did with Marty Stewart. It's called Country Music, The Masters, and I made it my first sort of enhanced digital book was this book. It didn't work. Again, I mean, just so you know, of the things I can tell you about, many things will not have worked, okay? This was introduced in October. It had 400 photos. It had audio narration. It had a music video embedded. We also have done Shakespeare. We published the Sourcebooks Shakespeare, and you can see audio embeds of so that you can hear audio scripts as audio scenes as you're reading your Shakespeare. So this happens to be the Macbeth textbook with audio embedded. The ones that I have announced so far, had a lot of problems, and I'm just going to tell you what the problems are. People did not want to download another platform. I mean, just think about yourself. You're a good example. Do you want to download another platform to your laptop? Probably not. There were issues of DRM. There were issues of pricing. There are lots of issues of formats. And all of those issues sort of compounded to what I would say are unbelievably low sales that would make nobody in this room happy. There are also, I think it's really important to think about the content issues, because a book fundamentally creates what I call, and other people have called, theater of the mind. Okay, this is where you're really creating a place, a space in somebody's head where they're imagining, they're putting together, right? It's not given to them. It's not a video. It's not passive. And you can read McLuhan. You can read about his theories of media, and the heat of different kinds of media, and therefore the issues that raises. There's also issues of integration. Where for example, Harlequin did a book, a digital book, where, you got to the Battle of Waterloo and you wanted to know what it was, you could click through, and where it took you was Wikipedia, okay? Well, what I noticed was when I clicked through to go to Wikipedia, guess what? Never came back. Never came back. So integration, how you integrate, it becomes really important, right? Because you really don't want to interrupt that theater of the mind. And similarly, you really don't want to interrupt the engagement and the immersion experience. You don't want to have big blocks that sort of somehow get in the way of somebody's reading. So we have a lot of kinds of issues to deal with, but I think today we can see, we can envision a better enhanced ebook. We can envision a device. We can envision a better device, a tablet or an iPad or mobile like the iPhone. I read on my iPhone all the time. We can envision what embedded media looks like. We can integrate it, and I think we can make it immersive. Okay, I'm going to go very quickly to this section about communities. I believe that this is also a part of our future, is creating communities that are tied to the verticals that we want to empower. And that's the part that Richard talked to you about. So I'm going to talk very quickly about the poetryspeaks.com experiment. It is a community experiment, and you can see Joy Harjo is there, as well as Emily Dickinson. And I think there was in your bag, I think there was a thing about poetryspeaks.com. We wanted to work on something where you could experience a poem, where you could make that poem visceral and immediate. We wanted to create a platform for poets and for the poetry community and for poetry publishers. And we wanted to help you discover a poem. So it's really a marketing site for poets, okay? And that's how we define the problem. Really, how do we create a methodology? The fundamental problem of poetry, says the poetry editor at Sourcebooks, is discovery. I mean, I think that if I sat almost anyone down and just talked to them for a little while, I could find a poem that touched, moved, and inspired them, even if they think they hate poetry. I mean, I really believe that. So how do I create that experience on the web? Because the web is the perfect discovery device, right? We know that the web and discovery go hand in hand. All right, so this is what Poetry Speaks looks like. It has 3 sections. It has voices for classic and contemporary poets, spoken word for the slam poets, and your mic, yep, that's YouTube for poetry. Okay? It's built around a poet page and a poem page. I'm not going to go through this in detail. You can experience it and kind of get a gist of what it does.
We no longer know whether the severe theater of your shadow breaks into ravens or is
okay, you get it? So you can go and you can hear 30 seconds, iTunes for poetry, right? So you can hear 30 seconds of the poet reading their own work and then discover the poet that you love. I did do this analysis, though, that I thought was interesting, and these are preliminary results. We did find that, and here it is, if you compare 6 weeks before and 6 weeks after a poet's poems appearing on poetryspeaks.com, their book sales increased 55%. I thought that, now, poetry, it don't sell much. Everybody who knows, right? Okay, so, but yet, 50% increases, you know what? That's not a bad thing. Okay. So the uses for the site continue to expand. And I think that because of poetryspeaks.com and other experiments that people are trying, you're going to see some new opportunities for poets, presses, poetry lovers, etc. And I think it creates the opportunity to create the next era of how poetry will be accessed and experienced. All right, so I'm going to just talk for a moment about managing experiments. I would urge you to start with reasonable, small, inexpensive experiments, okay? Inexpensive experiments. So, for example, I don't know if Mark's here, but we did an experiment with Smashwords in which we tried, I think, 15 DRM-free ebooks. Okay, it's a very inexpensive experiment. I mean, I just wanted to see, what was the piracy rate looking like, what was, oh, and there's Mark over there, and he's going to be talking this afternoon. So that's a very inexpensive kind of an experiment to run. Try a lot of things until something works. Many things will not work, okay? Focus on your strengths. You won't be able to do everything. So one of the things we've really, we're a small shop. Everything I'm showing you is being done by 4 people. Okay? Including, by the way, I count in there about 50% time. Okay? So it's not like I've got a team of 25 people doing this. It's not what it looks like. You got to focus yourself, your team, and your initiatives. And I'd urge you to focus your experiments on your top verticals. My friend Michael Cater said this at BISG, and if I think this is probably one of the most important things I'm going to say to you. Innovation is iteration. You will do it again and again and again. And something will break, okay? But it will not necessarily be the first thing you try right off the bat. Thank you. Questions? Yeah, sure, absolutely. So on baby names, none. On SAT, quite a bit, because, you know, it was interesting, and you might want to compare those. You know, on baby names, we had the #1 book, so how much lift you've got, you're not going to get a lot of lift. I mean, it's just, you know, you already own a lot of the market share out there. On SAT, about 2 years ago, we were the #8 SAT book in the country. This year, we're the #4 book. So we're coming fast. And part of it is, you know, the other work we're doing, but certainly part of it is the iPhone app. Other questions? No? Okay. All right. Thank you very much.